Hi, everyone. Welcome to the 2024 National Small Nonprofit Summit. My name is Kiara Frechette, and I'm the Nonprofit Programs Director here at Spur Local, and I speak for myself on behalf of our Executive Director, Matt Gayer, and our entire team when I say we are so excited to have you here. The theme for this year's summit is Power from the People, building our sector, strengthening our sector from the ground up, because we know that people, you all, the people you work with day to day, are at the heart of the work that we do. Knowing that demand services are increasing while giving amongst individual donors and volunteers are trending downward, we're noticing that many nonprofit leaders and staff continue to risk burnout. So more than ever, it's critical to realize that people power the nonprofit sector. So over the course of the next 2 days, whether you are participating virtually tomorrow or in person, there will be opportunities to hear from peers, share in small groups, and engage in workshops and breakout sessions on topics around development, communications, staff, board engagement, and more. So this morning, we have a fantastic speaker from the BIPOC Coalition of Washington State who will share about the power of rest. After lunch, we'll hear from Matt, the different results from the latest ED burnout survey that we conducted this year. And finally, later today, you'll have a chance to attend a panel of nonprofit leaders focused on what staff support looks like at their organizations. So we have a lot planned. And before I turn it over to Matt to get us started, I just wanted to remind you to download the Summit workbook we sent out. We're also sharing it here in the chat. This workbook is your guide to participation today. So it contains all the Zoom links you'll need to navigate between sessions. And it also includes some space to take notes and note contact information for folks that you may meet throughout the sessions today and tomorrow. So I think that is everything. If you have that downloaded, if you have your coffee, your water, you are ready to go. I'll go ahead and turn it over to Matt.
Great. Good morning, all. Thanks for joining. Thanks for being here with us. We're always really excited for this day each year when we get to kick off the National Small Nonprofit Summit. This is our fourth year of doing this now. So excited to dive in here. And as Kiara said, really dive into this topic, this theme that I know for all of us will resonate, which is that it's people that get this work done. A lot of times we end up talking about strategy and organizations and metrics and all this stuff, and we'll definitely cover a lot of that and a lot of the strategic elements over the next 2 days. But at the end of the day, it's the people doing the work. It's the people that we're working with in the community. It's the people supporting our work to make it possible. And that's really what we're going to dive into over these next 2 days. I'm really excited to do so with y'all. Speaking of people, I'm thanking a couple real fast. I just want to thank our sponsors for the event. These companies, you'll hear more about them over the next couple of days and also in follow-up, but graciously supported us to be able to make this summit possible, especially the in-person day tomorrow. For those of y'all that are attending that, so really grateful to our sponsors and grateful for helping us share this great content with y'all, and we all have this time together. So a little bit about us. I know many of you are long-term Spur Local partners, know us well. But for those that don't, for those that are newer to working with us or newer to kind of hearing about us, we are Spur Local. We're a nonprofit ourselves. We were formerly called the Catalog for Philanthropy. So you may have heard that name before or heard us say that, or if I'm tired enough, I might still say that every now and then. But I usually get the new name right these days. And we really are kind of a local nonprofit focused on local nonprofits. So we work with about 500 grassroots nonprofits across the DMV, but provide capacity building, consulting, et cetera, for nonprofits across the country, and really trying to think about how we can drive and support donors, volunteers, et cetera, to local organizations in the region and build capacity for the sector overall. So again, we've been around since 2003. Still have that core mission, right, of fundraising for local nonprofits. We raise about $5 million a year for local organizations, a little over $65 million since we started, but then also do a lot of capacity building and training. So for any of our partners, or for those of y'all that have subscribed to the Digital Learning Commons, digital capacity building space, we teach about 70 webinars a year, have an online resource library for folks. While we're really excited for these next 2 days, just know that for the other 363 days this year, there is support for you. Support to hopefully elevate the amazing work y'all are already doing. So with that, we'll go ahead and dive in a little bit to what today's agenda looks like for day one of the summit. So If you haven't figured it out, you're currently at the welcome and opening piece. So we'll set the tone a little bit for the next couple of days right now, and then dive into a keynote that we're really, really excited about. So as Kara mentioned, our keynote comes from Washington State, the BIPOC ED Coalition of Washington State, and they'll be talking about the power of rest, but also just the power of kind of sustainable wellness focus in the nonprofit space, right? Especially for nonprofit leaders, especially for nonprofit leaders of color. I won't take too much from that conversation already, other than say that it's going to be a really great talk, and they've done a lot of things that we all hope to do here in the region over the years to come. So excited to learn from them together and hear a little bit more about their work. At 11 o'clock, we'll move into peer-to-peer conversation. So this will be a chance to both hear from some of our speakers, but also hear from each other and connect with each other. And again, for any of these or the breakout sessions, you can find the topics and links in that workbook that's in the chat. We'll take a little break for lunch and for you to check the emails that pile up right throughout the day, and then come back together around 1 o'clock. At 1 o'clock, we'll go through the ED burnout survey results. So this is a survey we've been running for a few years now that we run with our partners each year, that we have over 170 nonprofit leaders respond to tell us about how they're doing and how their teams are doing. So we're really excited to share those results with you. So there's some really interesting insights from that. A lot will probably resonate. Some may surprise you. We're excited to have that conversation. So we'll reveal that data and talk about some takeaways that we can do and action steps from that data at 1. And we'll go into breakout sessions. So again, much like with peer-to-peer, there'll be a few different options for you to choose from there. So you'll be able to pick the one that seems relevant. Let's get this question. So yes, we are recording any of the sessions that we're doing. So while you cannot attend 3 simultaneously, probably, if there are 2 sessions you're really torn, at the end of the day, you'll be able to watch the other one in the coming days, and we'll post that to the Summit website in the future. So those recordings will exist, the slides will exist, so you don't have to miss out on anything over these next couple of days together. Then finally, we'll end today hearing from some of our nonprofit leaders themselves about how they're showing up and supporting their teams. So what they're doing that's really working, what challenges they're seeing in the space, and how they're thinking about nonprofit staff support. So with that, I wanted to think about for this opening session, right, when we think about what we can do to kind of kick off the day, set the tone, right, for some of these topics we're going to dive into much more meaningfully across the rest of the next 2 days, was thinking about what are some of the big questions we're hearing from nonprofits, we're hearing from leaders, we're being asked going into the summit that we'll try to answer together over the next couple of days, or at least begin to answer together. This is also a good reminder that I just want to encourage you that if you want to go ahead and just put your name and organization in the chat. I know you all are in the same physical space right now, but always good to kind of be saying good morning. So feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, give people a sense of kind of who's in the virtual space. We'd love if you can take a second to do that. That'd be great. And as you all are doing those virtual introductions, we'll go ahead and dive into some of the big questions we'll be talking about. So while there's a lot of different stakeholder groups we could cover over the next couple of days, we'll focus on 3 or 4 main ones because simply the time flies, right? So we want to make sure we kind of get deep in some of these topics. So the first one, the one we'll focus on a lot, the one some of our keynotes will focus on, is the one that all of us have, even if unpaid or volunteer in nature, which is staff, right? Rightfully so, the first group we're really thinking about is the group that's actually doing the work and getting the work done. When we look at staff, again, we'll talk more about this at 1 o'clock during the kind of data breakout from the burnout survey. But nonprofits are being asked to do a lot right now. That has always been true. That statement could have been at the nonprofit summit from 1982. But at the end of the day, the work is more complex than it used to be. The work is more nuanced. The work is more costly. The funding is more complicated. We hear this time and time again from nonprofit staff and leaders that the work just feels different and feels more than it did a few years ago, right? So what does that lead us to ask about? What are some of the questions we'll try to answer when we think about staff and the teams kind of doing this work over the next couple of days? We're going to be thinking about how are organizations investing in their teams, right? What are organizations doing, both really practically in terms of kind of staff benefits, and then also more kind of culture-wise, professional development, collaboration work, right? What are organizations doing? What are they investing time, focus, money into to try to make their teams more engaged and the work more sustainable? Secondly, and maybe kind of probably the first question here is just how are teams doing in the first place, right? Are folks thriving, engaged? Are they burnt out, disengaged, kind of all across the place? What trends are we seeing there? So one thing we're always lucky to have is in addition to the research that we do, uh, we have this bird's eye view, right, from working with 500 small organizations across the region. So we're sharing a lot of insights, anecdotes, examples, and stories to really ground how we see the sector doing right now, how we see the staff in the sector doing right now. Spoiler alert, they are busy, but we'll dive deeper into that in terms of what we're seeing engagement trends and seeing what's working and what's not. Equally important, specifically looking at how nonprofit leaders are doing, right? So executive directors, senior staff at organizations, what's their engagement like? Often, if their engagement's not there, it's hard for the engagement for the rest of the staff to be there as well. So we'll specifically look at kind of leader wellness in addition to overall team wellness over the next couple of days. And then finally, we'll think about what else does staff need, right? So beyond the kind of usual, what else are people doing to engage staff, and what's coming next? The last couple of years, rightfully so, given everything happening, a lot of nonprofit leaders have described their staff engagement and their strategy work in general as being reactionary, right? Something happens, I'm responding to it. Someone quits, I'm responding to it, I'm hiring. Burnout's happening, I'm responding to it. Stress is happening, I'm responding to it. So trying to look a little bit, not just at what's happening today, but what we see for nonprofit staff over the next 6 to 12 months, 6 to 18 months, and how you can get ahead of it, right? How you can make some plans around this, have some strategies in place to make sure your team is as prepared for the continuing challenging, complex work as it can be. The second focus group we'll have is around boards, right? If there is one universal topic that when we talk to nonprofit executive directors and nonprofit senior staff that they want more information about, it is probably boards and board management. We hear this question all the time, right? About either my board is great, how do I keep them doing great? Or I'm really looking for something different for my board in terms of engagement, output, income that they're providing for the organization, and thinking about how we're engaging them. So regardless of where you fall in the really happy with or frustrated by spectrum with your board this morning, some of the big questions we're going to ask is, what engagement trends are we seeing from boards? Boards, surprisingly, despite the kind of isolated experience that each board is unique, boards, much like staff, usually follow some kind of set engagement trends, and we see some trends across the sector. Excuse me. So we're thinking about that. Are boards more or less engaged than usual, right? Are they more or less engaged than they were a year ago? What are some takeaways we can have from this? And what does that mean for us as we're planning around our board engagement and board engagement work? Secondly, we're thinking about what's working to get boards involved, right? So for organizations that have boards that are highly functioning, that are fundraising, right, engaging, showing up, recruiting new people, building a leadership pipeline, et cetera, all those good things. What are boards doing that are getting people involved, that are helping them get to that place where they're really highly effective for the organization and making a real difference there? So we'll get into that as well. And then finally, looking at the kind of highest function of the board a lot of times in terms of a staff perspective, is that the board really can show up as a partner, right? It can help kind of be a partner for the executive director, be a partner for senior leadership. So for organizations we see that are doing that, how are they thinking about that? How are they connecting? How are they making that happen? Our third group, a group I know many of us think about often, is that donor group, right? So when we think about supporters, folks that are giving to our organizations to make our work possible. What are we seeing there? We'll talk a lot about and have talked a lot about in other sessions the trends we're seeing with donor participation right now. Not to again steal from some sessions you'll hear about over the next couple of days, but we know there's some really interesting. We're looking at academically and worrisome. We're looking at it budget wise. Trends with especially individual donors. 2022 saw a 22% decline in grassroots donors from the year before. We don't have final data yet from 2023, but we expect a similar, although less extreme, trend to have continued in 2023 with less people giving. Giving is more concentrated with major donors. The major donors are not necessarily increasing their giving right now, right? So with this kind of difficult kind of funding landscape, do we expect that to continue? Do we expect that to get worse? What are we seeing organizations do in response to that? How are organizations being impacted by that? Those are all things we'll talk about over the next couple of days in our donor sessions, trying to really hopefully help people see a little bit where things are going, most likely. But then also, at the end of the day, the donors that are there is the reality, right? If there's less people giving, if there's more people giving, we can only control that so much as individual organizations. We'll talk a little bit about some of the reasons behind that, but then also some of the success stories. For our partners that had a better than expected end of year campaign, that are excited about some peer-to-peer campaigns coming up. Really sharing some specific examples, right, of how they're making fundraising events, campaigns, donor outreach, etc., successful right now. We'll also talk a little bit about, again, from this kind of power to the people theme this year. What are donors looking for, right? So not just the donations themselves, right? But what do donors hope to get out of their giving experience, right? How can we get them engaged? What kind of partnership, relationship building can we do there to really make donors feel stewarded? We know that over half of donors that give to an organization in 1 year don't give the next, right? So the national donor retention rate is down to about 44%, I believe, for last year from some early data we were looking at. So as the retention rate continues to drop, while small nonprofits do outperform that because that's a national rate that includes larger organizations as well, donor retention is a real challenge for a lot of organizations right now, and that gets to the relationship, the trust, the stewardship, the people element of this. So we'll definitely talk about it in some of our fundraising sessions over the next couple of days. And then finally, a little bit of a conversation around how we align this work with our values, right? So we're thinking about the people at our organizations, the people we're working alongside in the community. How do we make sure that the way we're engaging donors is aligned to that value-wise, right? And stays on that kind of human-centered kind of focus, right? And value-centered focus to the outreach that we're doing. And then finally, the last group we wanted to highlight here was volunteers. So we'll talk about this in a few of our sessions. We'll also talk about this when we're talking about boards in general, right? But just like with donors, kind of what trends are we seeing with volunteers? Where do we need volunteers today? And how can I keep my volunteers engaged? I want to go back just for a second to the agenda here and spend just a few minutes before we'll get ready for our keynote here around 10:15. And talking about just kind of why this theme and how we'll kind of see this kind of power to the people show up over the next couple of days. When talking with our leaders, talking with the nonprofits we work with, we're always kind of a few months before the summit thinking about what that theme that year is going to be and thinking about what are some of the conversations we're having, hearing time and time again from nonprofits in the community. And the big thing we kept hearing from folks is both for their fundraising efforts, as well as their staff engagement and even their community work. It was more about relationships than ever before and more about recognizing where power is and where power needs to shift than ever before. And really thinking about how the staff that are on the ground doing the work can show up in decision making, can be engaged, can have kind of sustainable work. When thinking about how our donors can be engaged and really kind of get fulfillment right out of their giving. And we're really excited to be able to kind of focus on that theme over the next couple of days as we dive into these different kind of stakeholder groups. Someone said we're having a little bit of audio problem there. Apologize for that. I think it might be our Wi-Fi. We'll try to connect to a different network and please let us know if that continues to be a challenge. So one thing, a couple things to kind of tips for the next couple of days to think about how to get the most out of the next few sessions that we'll cover. Have a plan of action for the next couple of days, right? So again, the session right after the keynote, the breakouts this afternoon, there's going to be more than you can go to, right? So thinking about what sessions seem most important to me right now, what sessions seem most interesting to me right now, and for each of those sessions you plan to go to, really would encourage you write down one to three questions beforehand, right? Just to yourself, right? Take note on your phone or something. But one to three questions for any session you're going to, and if they don't get answered during the session, if we didn't proactively think about what you might be wondering about, ask those questions in the chat. We're going to save time at every session we do over the next couple of days for Q&A. So there'll always be a chance to ask those questions. If they don't get answered during it, we will follow up with you. But have those questions ahead of time to make sure you're getting what you need out of those sessions over the next couple of days. Secondly, think about, for any one session we do, right? There's usually going to be five or six different kind of specific tips, strategies, action steps that we're recommending to you. And why we always would love you to take all those back. That could be a lot to do, right? And a lot to implement all at once. So picking just two or three things from each session, right? Even one or two things from each session that you can actually start doing in the next 30 to 60 days. Really important to kind of get the ball rolling there. We see it's really important to have that kind of early progress. So again, kind of picking just kind of two or three things from any session you're going to, and overall, picking two or three probably from each day that you're going to put in place in the next month. Really important to prioritize there. And then finally, as you're picking those, right, and as you're kind of getting to the end of the summit tomorrow, you have kind of, these 5 or 6 different things you're thinking about doing. Start to sketch out why it's still fresh. Who's going to be involved, right? Who do I need to tell? Who else do I need to engage in this? What do I need to prep? How long do I think it's going to take? And when am I going to commit to starting? There may not be anyone else holding me accountable to do these things, but when am I going to hold myself accountable to put some of these steps into practice and kind of get working on a few of these elements? A couple other tips to kind of get the most out of the conference. And I will say, well, we'll actually talk about this here on this slide. So, is that resource guide? So that workbook that we posted in the chat that we'll email to you again later as well, that you'll have access to after the summit. Additionally, has a lot of great templates and worksheets in there. So we're talking about a lot of this. We're talking about a board commitment form for your board members. We're talking about a few different elements of fundraising, of board engagement, of staff engagement. A lot of templates and worksheets already exist in that guide, not for every single thing we'll talk about, but for most. So look through there and kind of see, is there a starting place that can save me some time and help me kind of hit the ground running on some of those things I might be committing to. Again, as already said, and we'll continue to highlight, ask questions early and often at any session that you're at. Again, we'll answer those as they come up or follow up if we run out of time there. But if you are thinking about that question, someone else is as well. So asking that can be really helpful. Make sure we're surfacing the kind of best and most relevant material for you. Find opportunities to connect with each other. I know that for some of you, this is going to be a completely virtual experience. That's always difficult sometimes to make kind of true connections, but as you're kind of seeing folks you recognize in the chat, seeing folks you recognize on the attendee list, feel free to reach out. Always great to kind of talk about some of these topics with other leaders as well, not just kind of isolated by ourselves. And then finally, last couple of things I'd say is that, we mentioned this at the beginning, uh, but there's a lot of other webinars and a lot of other resources shared throughout the year by a lot of different groups, but, from us directly. So we teach about 70 webinars a year. There's a resource library you can access. And you have those chances to kind of go more in depth on some of these topics. We'll talk a lot about boards and staff and donors over the next couple of days, but there's a lot more we can say and we do say. So I encourage you to kind of pick a couple of things to dive deeper on across the year. One way we see that folks, we talk to people who really take away something from the summit, and now a year later have done some things differently and benefited from it. One of the things we hear time and time again is that right after the summit or during the summit, they told someone else at their organization about what they were learning or talking about. Right, so they shared that insight that they had. They shared the thing they're excited about. They shared the tool or worksheet with a colleague, with a board member, with a peer at another organization. And by doing so, it really cemented it for them, right? And made them more likely to actually follow through on it. So when we talk to a few organizations that put into practice some of the things they learned at the summit last year, that was something we heard from a couple people, that sharing is really important. So if you hear something today, especially during our keynote or a DA debrief that seems interesting, would encourage you to make sure you're sharing that with others as well. And then finally, again, there'll be a lot of sessions, a lot of content over the next couple of days. So find a way that works for you to take some notes. We'll send out the slides and recording afterwards, so you'll have access to the slides and recording of every session that we do. For those of you that are doing virtual tomorrow, there'll be asynchronous kind of, you can attend any time virtual sessions. For those of you that are going to be in person, we'll still share out the resources and slides from it. So we'll be giving you as much as we can, but really encourage you also to take some notes there to remind yourself kind of what stood out to you in the days to come. I want to talk just a little bit more about some of the resources there, and then we'll pause as we get ready for our keynote here around 15. So in that workbook, I don't know how many folks got a chance to open their digital copy yet, but again, you'll see a lot of templates and worksheets that'll be relevant to sessions throughout the next couple of days. So that not only is your guide to kind of where you go to find the sessions that you're attending, but it also will have resources, templates, etc. Those are all templates that are pulled from our online learning library. So any of you that are a Spur Local partner or have a membership to our digital capacity building, you actually have access to that portal every day of the year, just in time for whenever you need support. If you don't know how to access that, feel free to reach out to our team. We're happy to help you get access to that. Those templates and worksheets, so I really encourage you that as you're able to, especially prepping for day 2, looking at those ahead of time, you'll be able to see what we're going to end up talking about that you're doing right for a board matrix or commitment form or a performance review template. And as you're looking at those, again, that might spur some additional questions for you to kind of prep and have these sessions ahead of time. So that, I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing my screen here. Great. And we are going to get started with our keynote here in just a minute. So feel free to just grab some coffee, and we'll get started here just around kind of 10:15, 10:20 with our keynote. Thank you all for joining. We're excited to dive into the next session in just a few minutes.